3, 2, 1.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the January 20th Intuit Developer Friday morning Hangout. Today we have a special guest. Jimmy Wong's going to come on and do his encore presentation of his QuickBooks Connect breakout session, building your first QuickBooks app integration. So with no further ado, Jimmy, I'll let you take over and jump in and continue on.
Excellent. Thanks, David. So we are going to go over how to build your first QuickBooks app integration today. And this was originally presented by myself and Manas, who was my partner at QBC Connect 2016 in San Jose back in October. And we're really excited to do the presentation again. Manas, unfortunately, had something else going on today, so he won't be with us. Okay. I'm having a little difficulty here. I can't get to the next slide. There. Okay, Manas is a staff software engineer at Intuit Developer Group. He works with developers to build SaaS applications on top of the QuickBooks Online ecosystem, and he likes to find ways to use technology to simplify and make lives better. I'm a developer evangelist, and I focus on providing the best developer experience with the QuickBooks Online APIs. And I help developers build app integrations and help them publish them on the QuickBooks App Store at apps.com. Now, before Intuit, I was a front-end web developer, and I used front-end technologies like Marco.js, Node.js, and AngularJS. Okay, this is my joke of the day. The best thing about a Boolean is if you're wrong, you're only off by a bit. Haha. So our agenda for the day, we're going to go over the functions that are available on QuickBooks Online API. And then we're going to talk about the type of apps that you guys can develop on the API. And then we're going to show you some pointers on how to get started. And we're going to talk about the sandbox and SDKs. And then we'll be creating, well, I'll show you the slides for creating your app with a hands-on demo. And then we'll talk about publishing QuickBooks on the QuickBooks App Store. So this is what QuickBooks Online looks like. It's an accounting software that helps small businesses manage their sales, customers, employees, inventory, expense, and pretty much all parts of their business. And now the thing is, no matter how much we improve the user experience of QuickBooks Online, there's always going to be this fundamental problem where small business owners, they really just want to focus on their own businesses. So coffee shop owners, they just want to make coffee. Bike shop owners, they just want to sell their bikes, right? So that's the whole reason why we've opened up our APIs to let you guys build apps to solve their most pressing needs. So the QuickBooks API is a fully RESTful API. It supports OAuth for authentication and allows you to access the functions of QuickBooks Online. So for example, you can manage customer and vendor databases, or you can keep track of sales or get reports on how your business is doing. And then in addition to that, we have the QuickBooks Payments API, which allows you to process payments really easily online. So here's a list of apps that you can build, but this is really only scratching the surface. There's a lot more small business problems out there, and they're really just waiting for you guys to tackle them. So, if you see a small business problem, we really encourage you guys to come up with something innovative to solve their problems because they need your help. So here are some examples of these apps. We have big players like PayPal and American Express, but we also have other companies like T-Sheets, which does timesheet applications. So we have a pretty good selection of apps that's out there, and we really encourage you guys to publish your app to join this group. So we have a marketplace for you guys to put your apps in front of a huge audience of paying customers. By signing up with Intuit, you have the opportunity to publish your app on Intuit's intuit.apps.com, where we currently have over 400 listed apps on the QuickBooks App Store. And the best thing is that users can see your app actually from the Apps tab within QuickBooks itself. So let's move on to the QuickBooks Online API. This diagram is a basic overview of QuickBooks, and I want you guys to pay attention to that center section there. That's where we have our name list entities of customer, vendor, item, which is also called inventory, and account. Now, for each of these entities, there's this corresponding transaction. So, for example, when you sell something to a customer, you create a money in transaction, which can be an invoice or a sales receipt. And whenever the customer actually gives you a payment, you can do a payment entry. So this is a further breakdown of those entities. So as you can see, list transactions reporting, they have a lot of functionality in each one of them. Okay, so to help you guys get started, we have SDKs in the following languages: .NET, Java, and PHP. And we also have open source SDKs for Ruby, Node.js, Perl, Python, and shell scripting. Now, to help make your lives easier, we created some really helpful tools to get your development started. We have a Postman collection for QuickBooks Online to help you test out calls without even writing any code. Another alternative to that is the API Explorer, which allows you to try out calls. And to help you get further into the code, we have sample apps for you to download and try out on your own. And once you guys get to the point where you're ready to test your app, we provided a sandbox for you guys to make your calls, and it's totally free. And to help you make your app look its best, we provided the Harmony design system to help you leverage the look and feel of QuickBooks Online to give it a real seamless look between QuickBooks and your app. And we have the OAuth playground that allows you to generate OAuth tokens, and those are important to allow you to make your API calls. So let's go on to creating your first app. So as you can see, these are the steps in creating your first app. The first thing you have to do is create a account with developer.intuit.com. Then you got to log in. Then you go to the App Center where you create your first app, and then you generate your auth tokens in the OAuth playground, and then you can test your API calls in Postman, and you can make API calls using in our case Node.js SDK, but in any of the SDKs we have available. So here's the flow for the account login. Basically, it's just the login screen. This is where you go to create your app in the developer site. As you can see, once you create your app, you get a set of keys. So you get your app token, your consumer key and your consumer secret. These are important because these are what identifies your app. And this is where you go to generate your OAuth tokens. So let me zoom in here a little bit. So on your left here, you enter in your consumer key, your consumer secret. And the access token duration is how long your app is available for. And the number you see there is, I believe, 6 months worth of duration. So this is in seconds. And then you click the connect to QuickBooks, and it generates your tokens. And these are what you need for making. Now, in our session at QuickBooks Connect, Manas had demoed an integration with the Amazon Echo. We don't have that Manas today, so we will not be doing that. But it was an interesting, very interesting integration. Thank you. Okay, next, we'll talk about publishing on the QuickBooks App Store itself. So you as an app developer, the first thing you have to do is you have to make sure your app meets all the tech and security requirements. They're all up on our documentation on the developer website. Once you do that, you submit it for, once you do that, you move on to completing your app card, where you'll submit your application for review, for tech review. The app card is what your customers will see on apps.com. So that's where you want to make your app look good, and you talk about what small business problem you're tackling and why it provides value for the end user. And then once in the tech review, we make sure that all the basic requirements are working, like like the app loads and it does what you say it does. And once it passes tech review, then we need you to prepare for security review and make sure there's no flaws in your design, and people can't you hide people's data, and you just make sure your app is secure. And then once you do that, you submit your app for security review. Once it passes that, you need to prepare your app for marketing review. So that goes back to the app card. Make sure that the app looks good and everything makes sense on your app card. And once you pass that, you can prepare for publishing. And once you're done with that, you can go ahead and publish on the App Store. That is the flow for that. That's the end of the deck. So I guess at this point, I could just field questions from our audience.
So Jimmy, I know you're going back one slide to the Amazon Echo.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that you guys actually had an Echo, and it doesn't demo well through a Blue Jean situation like this, but I know at the actual in-person at live, you guys had an Echo there. Can you talk about some of kind of the simple use cases you guys were using the Echo for, like what you asked it to do, what it actually went and got from QuickBooks, what it brought back in a response? Can you kind of almost fake it, just kind of pretend that you have an Echo and walk through how those interactions, just to kind of so people capture in their imagination, right? Like how the Echo, a small business owner can talk to the Echo and the Echo can talk to QuickBooks and pull that data back. Kind of a brief.
Sure. So so we created the situation where we pretended that Manas had his own electronic store, right? So Manas is at the end of his day, and like other small business owners, he wants to know how well his business is doing, right? So what we had Monas do was he went to the Alexa and he said, ask QBO if my business is profitable. And when he said ask QBO, QBO is an actual Alexa skill that Monas had created. And the intent is the question that he asks. And the intent in this case is his business profitable, right? And the Alexa would respond saying, yes. So the Alexa would make there would be a backend call to QBO. And I believe Monas had some criteria for whether or not the business was doing well, and the Alexa would respond with saying yes, the business is profitable. So in a real life demo, it's really cool. So basically, that's how that worked. We also tried.
I think maybe an inventory lookup, right?
Yeah, we tried another. It would look up the. It would look up the backend call. Would look up data from the profit and loss API. So that's how Alexa knew whether or not the business was doing well. So, and then after that, we looked into another scenario where we were actually trying to save the small business owner time by helping him check his inventory without him having to hire help to do this. So he can simply purchase a pre-built skill from the Amazon marketplace, and he can use it however he wants. So that's a really good opportunity for our app developers, because we're just using that Echo as an example, but there's any number of SaaS and IoT devices that are coming out which they can integrate with to create awesome, real life problem solving situations for owners. So an example of that was I had asked the Alexa if we had any iPhones in stock, right? And the Alexa would check the back end to see if there was any iPhones in the inventory within QuickBooks. And the Alexa would say, no, we don't have any. And because it's an Amazon product, we're actually able to order iPhones from the Alexa itself. So it's just a really basic use case. But what we really wanted, the intent behind our demo was to give developers ideas on what they can expand with. So like I said, the Alexa is only one device. There's all sorts of devices coming out that can help solve small business problems.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're like, I see these devices like this, and now developers can kind of, before it was like, oh, build an app that ran a browser on a phone. And now you can build integrations that are beyond just quote unquote an app. And it really is starting to give, like you could have this in your small businesses, you could give your employees access to QuickBooks data, but they never actually have to have their fingers in QuickBooks. Like they're not in QuickBooks, they're not clicking things in QuickBooks, they're not changing things in QuickBooks, but they can actually see see is not the right word. I mean, maybe they can see some QuickBooks data through, maybe it's a chat bot, right, in Slack instead of an Amazon Echo, but it's creating that orchestration level where you're able to give people more access to the QuickBooks data through the API calls, instead of letting people actually just go into QuickBooks, which is really the security model, which is a lot of people want, right? You don't want, if you have a law firm, you don't want 50 lawyers typing into the accounting system, right? You want them to interact through either an app or a device now. I mean, the devices are just now starting to hit.
Right. And, like I said, in a lot of cases, they don't even want to think about QuickBooks, right? Like they just want an easy interaction where they get to know how well they're doing or what's going on with their inventory or any number of things. So they really don't want to look at the numbers. I mean, how many small business owners went into being a small business owner thinking, oh yeah, I want to do accounting? Like not too many of them, right?
Yep, absolutely. So I think what we'll do, Jimmy, is we'll open up the floor to some questions. Everybody we have a nice turnout today. It's great. We should be able to answer some questions in regards to this. I'd like to keep the questions definitely focused on kind of building the first app, publishing on apps.com the first time, making your first API call. Nothing really deep let's not troubleshoot any error messages today, or some support ticket that you may have opened in the past. We'll save those types of questions for open office hours, but really let's keep the questions focused if we can today just on, this first, for those of you that are coming in like, hey, I just created a developer account. Now what's my next step? Or I just submitted to do my tech review. What's the next step? Those types of questions really around building your first app. So with that said, those of you that want to, you can unmute yourself and jump in if you have any questions. Not everybody at once here. Jimmy, just while we're waiting for maybe somebody to pull together their thoughts or come up with a question or have the courage or find the mute button sometimes. Obviously, when you did the presentation, you had questions from the audience. What were a couple that stood out in your head that people had?
I think the one that really stood out, and I think Monis was a little bit more, he knew the rules a little bit better than I did, but whether or not they own the customer data as developers, like were they able to, exploit the data or whatever. And I believe the answer was no. Like, no. You're able to use the customer data for the purposes of your app, but you can't collect it, or you can't. Is that a question from somebody?
Yeah, I think David and Corey have a question here.
Hi, this is David and Corey here at Evisys. We had a question regarding, I guess, accessibility to QuickBooks data, meaning, I attended the Seattle event, and we kind of posed a question about how often we could make calls to QuickBooks. And we were kind of encouraged. I mean, there was an initial kind of thought that we could use it as the data repository. So like the customer table lived in QuickBooks, and we would interact with it kind of in a real-time basis. And we were discouraged from that. But can you give us more context about like the number of calls? Is there rate limiting? Your documentation, does kind of outline that there's some limits for interaction. So I took away from the Seattle meeting, I guess, which was in May or April, that we would be doing synchronization of data only, and not to think of QuickBooks as maybe, the definitive source data for some aspects of our application.
Hey, David, you're on mute.
Sorry. All right, I'll unmute. Sorry about that. I'm going to paste in a URL to the throttling limits that are actually on the documentation site. And it's unfortunate that Manis wasn't here today, because Manis is actually the guy that we have kind of policing this a little bit. He's actually looking at the calls that are coming in on the back end, figuring out where developers are maybe overutilizing the APIs, and then reaching out to those developers to help them actually change their code and make more efficient calls. So it is a little bit of a shame that he is not here today to kind of possibly talk to that at a deeper level. I'm trying to get the actual blog post here. So there's a blog post talking about that the API limits are coming. And let me get the actual documentation. Actually, I think has some of the. Actually, this has the details in it, which is
that
nice.
Would be on a per customer basis, correct?
I don't think customer. I think it's going to be based on your developer API keys and your tokens. I don't think it's a customer per se. So let me flip over. I lost the chat. Chat.
This is concerning for us, just because if we have 5,000 to 10,000 customers, we're trying to understand what that impact might be. I'm assuming this is going to be a higher limit, ultimately.
Like if you're going to have when you say 5,000 customers, like you have 5,000 customers on a list in QuickBooks Online, or when you say you have 5,000 customers using your app that are basically 5,000 QuickBooks customers
that will be using our app.
Your app, okay. So they're going to be syncing, right, the changes. And with webhooks now, you can actually wait and see if there's even any changes, right? On your app, on your app side, you know if they've changed the customer address or phone number, and you know on your side if you need to send that over to QuickBooks. If they've changed something in QuickBooks, you can sign up for webhooks, and you could. So if there's a change in QuickBooks, through your webhooks subscription, subscription's not the right word, but notification, you would know that a customer's changed that list, and you'd be able to sync that back to your app. So it should help make the calls efficient instead of you syncing, sync all 15,000 customers from QuickBooks Online into my app. Oh, and then 5 minutes later, do it again, and then do it again.
Yeah.
So,
and we're actually exploring the use of a real-time database to kind of facilitate this, so that again, we're not moving large data sets, but it will be fairly chatty if you look across our user population at some point.
Okay. So I did post that in that blog post, and Jared actually covers, a little bit of what's going to be changing, and then kind of the why, and then how it possibly could affect you.
Okay. At some level, I guess you'd be happy that we had 5,000 QuickBooks Online customers using our app.
So, from what we've seen on our side, it's not people that are hitting the throttling limits. It's not because they have a lot of customers. It's because they've written some code that's maybe not efficient. And then the real thing that kills us, because this has brought down the platform, right, is we'll find out that a developer had some automated testing running, and they forgot it was running, or it had an error, and next thing you know, it's sending 4 million requests every 5 minutes, right? Like that's why we have to have these throttle limits in. Is it's usually under normal circumstances, people aren't hitting throttle limits. It's bugs in their code, or maybe bugs in their test server, something like that happening. Very rarely are we, I have yet to actually come across somebody that's like, oh, this is our genuine use case and we're exceeding your limits. It's usually there's something going on.
David?
Yeah.
I'm looking at the link you sent, and it looks like it's requests per realm ID. So I don't, that's effectively per customer.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to be a problem if you have, it's not, the number of customers you have, the way I'm reading it, shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
It's how much you're doing with each customer.
Yeah.
So realm ID equals customer?
Yes.
Or I guess QuickBooks instance.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, then this is totally a non-issue for us.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Which is good, because I'm anticipating with webhooks, I'm going to get pinged every time someone changes. I'm syncing customers and items. Every time any of my users changes the spelling of a customer name or anything, I'm going to get pinged. So there's going to be a lot of traffic, but this is per realm ID, so it's not an issue.
Yep.
But it's efficient traffic, right? And that's, I think, the difference. Right.
And that's one of the reasons why we're looking at real-time databases.
Yeah.
Yep. The other question is, we manage our own payments, and I know that I've looked through the app marketplace. You have other customers that are doing payments. Applications or plugins. I'm not sure what the right nomenclature is. If we're designing our app so that we can accept payments through our own mechanism, we can design effectively a plugin to route payments through our infrastructure for QuickBooks Online, correct? Meaning we can expose an app inside of the QuickBooks interface that would allow, very similar to using the QuickBooks or Intuit payments, to our payment service. Is that accurate?
Well, in your app, right? If you have some other payment service you're using, let's say it's Stripe. It's not Intuit payments, you're using Stripe, right? Yes, those payments you're gonna have a record of those payments in your app, and then I don't know if you're sending the sales over, if you're sending every sale over, if you're sending invoices over, but you should probably record the receipt of payment also against that invoice.
Yep.
Right, as a receipt of payment. So you're not really sending over the actual charges per se, right, as a payment item, but you're sending over a receipt of payment, which is a transaction type, and that links back to those invoices.
Got it. In terms of an interface, though, if I'm sitting and using QuickBooks Online, is there a way for us to route through our payment services if you're actually using the QuickBooks app? Do we have that level of integration available?
No, I think right now so we have Intuit payments, so they do ACH, credit cards, PayPal, Square. I think there's a Bitcoin. Jimmy, do we have any other when you send out an invoice the customers can enable?
I think you pretty much covered it.
I think it's just those ones right now. I mean, you have your own proprietary payment system of some type?
Yeah, you could call it that.
Okay. So you're a payment processor then? Is that?
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, so we would have the question came up, meaning if we're writing a business companion app where all the, quote, heavy lifting of our customers happens inside of our mobile and web app, and we manage payments through that, and we record those transactions into QuickBooks to effectively say, QuickBooks is the accounting package or the financials package for this company, but we're the front end, right? We write the whole business management layer, field service management, point of sale, the whole 9 yards. If you have somebody in the back office that maybe isn't using our app and is logged into QuickBooks and they want to process a payment, the question was, can we effectively do that for that user who might be, a service manager or somebody sitting inside of a retail location, and they're not using our app? Do we have a mechanism to route through our payment processing via QuickBooks Online? Because you can create invoices and add items to invoices, and do a standard process of making a sale using the QuickBooks application. And
yeah, so at that point they're not using your app, right? So at that point, correct, they're just using QuickBooks and the payment options we offer them.
Okay, and you don't have plug-in ability for us to plug in our payments option into that flow.
That's correct. Hopefully, I mean, we're just experimenting. We're really just starting to experiment with UI plugins on at the last QuickBooks Connect. We do have an experiment currently going on with Bill.com, where Bill.com has a UI integration into the QuickBooks Online. T-Sheets has a UI integration. These are very, 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 very new. We're not really open to a lot of developers yet. And when it comes to the payments, we're kind of going, obviously we start with our own payment service first, right? Sure. And then it's whatever's in most demand from customers, and it's kind of heading down that type of a path. Hopefully that eventually kind of could be opened up to anybody, could just plug in and be a payments option. Because I mean, if you're a small business owner, right, and you send an invoice to a customer via email and they click on the button that says pay now, you want to offer as many payment options as possible so they pay you, right? If you tell them they can only pay you through cash, well, they might not pay you right away or only send a check. But if you can offer them Visa, credit, MasterCard, you pay through Square, pay through your PayPal, pay through your Apple Wallet, your Google Wallet, right? If you can offer all those options, the chances of them paying you faster is much higher. So ideally, in the perfect scenario, we'd want every single payment type available to a customer. They can.
And I guess,
but as of right now, we're kind of going. We've done some of the bigger ones, and we're working our way down probably the ladder.
Yeah, and for us, it's also
is your app a SaaS app?
Yes. So the other issue. Oh, I'm sorry. The answer to your question is yes. But the other piece that I was kind of driving at for our customers is that if they sign up to our SaaS app and they're able to process payments through our app and all is good, that means that they have effectively a merchant account, through us. And if they're offered options like, doing a credit card payment, again, thinking about the persona of the back office person, maybe sitting inside of QuickBooks and generating a quick invoice and wanting to accept payment for it. And currently we don't have the ability to kind of plug into your infrastructure from QuickBooks. Then it means that they kind of have another merchant account, or at least another repository, meaning the QuickBooks payments, world.
If I'm a small business owner using your app, I'm going to run all my sales through your app and all my payments through your app, right? I'm actually going to be like, oh, I'll use it sometimes, and sometimes I'll just put it into QuickBooks, right? Like it's like a workflow, right? Like, so I just think it could be a little bit of an edge case, but I mean, the workaround's easy. Don't put the sales in your app. Like if somebody's paying you for your app, right, and they intend to use your app to run their business, like they want the advantages you're bringing to the table, right?
Okay.
I mean, somebody could still do it because QuickBooks is there, and somebody could just type in. But maybe it's an easy way, right? You just sync that invoice back over to your app, and they have to go to your app to receive the payment.
Got it.
The thing with webhooks, you can do it basically. With webhooks, you can do it, but the thing is, webhooks sync every 5 minutes, so it's not going to be, when you want to run a credit card, you don't want to wait 5 minutes to have it load into your app.
Yeah.
The polling interval is 5 minutes for webhooks.
The notification, yeah.
Well, that's when you get the notification, right? I mean, you can pull it as often as you want, but you don't know that something's happening. And basically, you could be monitoring all of the invoice creation activity, but in 5 minute intervals where you'd be notified. Now, if they're in a browser, if QuickBooks is in one tab, you can have another tab, go over there and hit a button and get it all right now. You could load the date, load the invoice, and then you could do your payment right there.
Got it. Okay. That's helpful. You can appreciate sometimes where it's confusing where the line might be about what you're doing in your app versus in QuickBooks. We're trying to, create a space where it's easy for the users, and then also kind of, navigate through what QuickBooks does, what we need to do, what information sharing is going to go between the two.
Yeah, I think the rule of thumb I'm telling developers is think of it, QuickBooks is the accounting system, right? And your app is the actual interface for the small business owner and the employees of the company. So maybe only the accountant, right, maybe touches QuickBooks. Or maybe they have a bookkeeper that pays a couple bills, pays the phone bill and pays some bills out of QuickBooks. But ultimately, like if your app is the software the business is using 8 to 10 hours a day to run their business. Right. And that's an easy way to define those lines, I think. And because really you don't want, 15 employees in a warehouse all in the accounting system typing away, right? You want them to use inventory software, right? And so that's where I think that the more you do in your app, the better, and then you send that data over. But where it gets confusing when it's gray, like, oh, we'll just send the invoices, but when you want to pay them, you need to go to QuickBooks to pay them, or like you receive the payments. That's where it gets really gray, I think. Is where if you have multiple different workflows, like either they're using your app or they're not using your app, right? Because I think if there's different workflows, then eventually they'll be like, what's the point of your app? I'll just do it with QuickBooks, right? And then they may not want to use your app as much.
Got it.
We need to live in our app all day long.
Right.
Do contact us.
And if you're doing heavy volume, I know you said like point of sale. Some of the point of sale people aren't even sending over every sale. They're just sending over a summary transaction at the end of the day, like a Z-tape or a closing entry, right? Where it's just a big journal entry where it updates the inventory value and it updates the sales and the sales tax and all that.
So you have seen companies that are actually doing that summary level, but also affecting the inventory in a bulk way.
Yeah, because I mean, you could, and this is an argument that's been kind of a thought argument point of view that's kind of bubbled up over the years. I think Doug Sleater brought it up about 5-6 years ago when he started asking that question: does all the payroll data need to live in QuickBooks? Well, no. You could have all the payroll data live in a payroll system, and then you could just have a summary of that transaction in QuickBooks. And it's kind of evolved the same thing. Like if you have a point of sale, and that's actually managing your inventory, and telling you how many or what your inventory numbers are. Do you need to have the exact same numbers for every single inventory item in QuickBooks? Maybe, maybe not, right? Or can you just have the full dollar value in QuickBooks because the inventory is in the point of sale?
Got it.
And then so that's apps are handling it different ways, and I don't think there's a perfect solution. It depends on the customer and the end user, but arguably, does it make? Do you have to do that? Does all the inventory items and quantities need to be in QuickBooks? I don't know. I'm kind of leaning towards, nah, it doesn't make sense. It's already in the app. Do you need it in two places?
Right. What I think of is I also think of when you're dealing with reporting, you know, what do you need to do to deliver clean reporting? As a, you know, that's kind of a consumed activity by, you know, a business owner or a bookkeeper or CPA or something. How much of that information needs to be in QuickBooks to make your reporting, your base financial reports and some of the other reports that are in QuickBooks meaningful? So, you know, if you're just moving around journal entries, it may not be that meaningful inside of QuickBooks. So there is some measure of detail that probably has to be accounted for.
Yeah, and then that's that fine line of like maybe your app is targeting some sort of niche. I think you said field service, right? There's probably certain reports that you're going to be better at and you're going to have knowledge of, and you're going to build using the data in your app that are going to be better for the small business owner to make decisions versus more of the generic financials. Like, hey, your ratio of AR, your ratio of AP, your inventory values or valuations are too high, you know, based on your revenue. Like they'll be able to get those from that high level information you're sending over. But how many size medium shirts did we sell the week of July 15th? The account doesn't care, right? And that's a really high level. That's a level of detail that if you have in your app, doesn't need to be re-replicated in QuickBooks. That's the ultimate question and argument. And when I say argument, it's different point of views, you know, on reasons, pluses and minuses for those reasons.
Totally, I agree. The last question I have is, you know, going back to that question of what lives inside of QuickBooks. Are there extensible custom fields that we have access to inside of QuickBooks?
I think, and Jack, I think if you jump in, I think you know this a lot better than I do offhand. I think it's still just 3 in QuickBooks Online. I think QuickBooks Desktop had a lot more custom fields across every single item list. And I think
that was my recollection.
And QuickBooks Online just has 3. Jack, I know if you could jump in, I think you've looked into this pretty deeply before, correct?
Well, it's just that
Oh, we can hear you now, Jack.
You did?
Hi. Yeah, it's only 3, and they're only for sales transactions. They're not on customers. They're not on items. So you can only have 3, and that's really it.
Okay. All right. Well, that's helpful. You guys have been very helpful today. We appreciate it. We'll be on the next 4 calls here over the next 4 weeks. Probably some different team members from our group will be on the calls. It was really helpful for us to hear some of this information again, and then also some new information as we walk through our design and implementation process.
That's great. And next week, for everybody that's on, we're going to do app integration best design practices. And so this is where it's really getting deep dives on like things like why you'd want to sync inventory or not sync inventory, or how to handle that sales tax, or how to handle that payment correctly. So that way, when the accountant goes to reconcile the bank account, the fees that were taken out for the merchant services are correctly accounted for. So there's that's the type of stuff that'll be covered next week with Peter and Peter. And all those are on the events page, which I'll paste the link in. Did anybody else have any questions today?
Dave, I had a question. It's not really a startup question. Just in playing with webhooks, I wanted to load some new customers in to see if it was going to sync back to my app. And so I did the import data. Just nothing to do with integration really. It was just importing a list of customers from an Excel spreadsheet, and what a bad experience that was. It's like you get some red flags where the emails are not correct or whatever, but you clear all those out. It doesn't tell you all the errors, and I could never get. I was able to get your sample 17 records to import, but never real data or my fake data. So it was just interesting. Just a comment.
Oh,
really,
like you were just
unless you know about that.
You were just doing an import through the QuickBooks Online UI, just importing in a spreadsheet of data.
Right. Not the API. Just loading an Excel sheet into QuickBooks like any user might do, just to get started.
Yeah, which I mean, and that's the biggest flaw with that. There's no business logic, right? And I can go back to doing tech support 18 years ago, and people have their IIFs and they're importing to QuickBooks Desktop, and it doesn't work, right? And this is before people would even email the file to you, right? They'd have to fax it in. They'd have to look on there and figure out, oh, you must have hit your elbow on the keyboard in that one field. There's an exclamation point, and then it breaks the whole delimited file after that, right? And so it's just an unreliable way to bring data in. I would recommend possibly moving it through something like Jack's products or Transaction Pro Import or something like that, because then there's business logic wrapped around that spreadsheet, right? It's taking each line and then it's turning it into an API call and putting it into QuickBooks through an API call instead of just pulling that data in. Yes. My argument is nobody should ever import from spreadsheets. They should only bring in data through the APIs.
I didn't see that in the documentation, that recommendation.
It's kind of been my soapbox for the last 4 years. I think even.
I got it down to where I only wanted to import one field, the name, and I couldn't get it to work. I mean, I really think something's really wrong with that, or I'm just doing something wrong. It's not really clear you've got red flags sometimes, but I clear all the red flags and the import button still is grayed out. It's a bad experience.
Yeah, I don't
try.
Know
have you tried it on the new on? Don't do it, right?
No, I haven't tried it. I'm very much against the importing in table data. I think it's there's a lot of risk. Maybe if those customers are already there, there's no security there. It's a bad experience for users. Users don't pay attention. They import the same data twice, and there's no checks and balances. It's just not a good way to bring data in. And so yeah, I agree. If you're having problems, it's kind of like that's one of the big issues with it. There's too many problems versus API calls, or too many potential problems.
Well, thank you for your answer.
I think I have the top 20. I have a link to an old archived video that talks about why IIF files are bad. Let me see here. Top 20.
I know they can come up with a database.
Yeah, that too. There's a whole list of reasons importing in CSV, IIF files, etc. are bad across the board. They're just not super reliable.
But desktop, you need admin mode, single user. That's why our IIF import has been out for a dozen years now.
Yeah, I just posted a link to top 20 developer questions, but question number 10 on that URL I just pasted into the chat is specifically about importing in IIF files. And it's funny because even I found a 2010 blog post from Charlie Russell. So Charlie Russell does a lot of blogging, for the Sleater blog, for the Sleater group. In a 2010 blog post, he said, I generally do not recommend using a program that uses IIF import. IIF is not a best practice. So even in 2010, people that have been around this space for a while are like, don't do it. So it's one of those things. I think, we created that standard, the Intuit interchange format, before APIs existed, right? And so I think that was a good standard for 1997, but we're now 20 years later, time to move on from CSV files.
I'm not talking about IIF. I understand. You've got a user interface where you map the fields, you select which fields you want to import. It's a CS. It's Excel. It's not IIF format at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's all the same umbrella, right? Excel, CSV, IIF. It's bulk table data that just is not brought in because it's very hard to import that stuff in. It's not reliable. We could troubleshoot it and figure out why, but it's a lot of, it's not a recommended way to bring in data. And I know, and unfortunately we have menus for it in QuickBooks, right, for people to do it. And but I'm on the camp of people should never do it. It's very, very unreliable and dangerous. From an end user standpoint, you'll hear nightmares where people are like, oh, I forgot to rename the file the last time my accountant sent it to me. Then I imported the same data twice. Now I have 500 transactions duplicated. So, sorry, there's not a lot they can do. And so there's just a lot of risk to importing. And then on top of that, it doesn't work, then you can't figure out why it's not working. All right, with that said, I'm going to jump over to the sharing for a second. And Jimmy, if you don't mind, I'm going to share. I'll replace Jimmy's content. That's what I wanted to do. I'm going to share Firefox. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see this by now. So here's the upcoming events. So like we said, next week is going to be the app integration best design practices. The week after that will be global, preparing your app to go global. So really discussing the two big things that hit people: multi-currency and then the global tax model, because a lot of the countries are using a VAT tax model, and that's a little bit different than the rest of QuickBooks if you have a development with that. And so we'll be jumping into that. And then after that, the week after that, I have to put up, we actually the week after that is February 10th. So we'll be designing for mobile, and that's a really good presentation from Joe Preston that really covers kind of anything you want to know and the reasons why to do things for mobile, and actually even working from a mobile first perspective and working your way back towards your desktop SaaS app. And then webhooks is the February 17th. And then February 24th, I don't have it up here yet, but we're going to have members of the Wasabi team. They've created Intuit had built their own internal A/B testing platform, and it's now been open sourced. It's called Wasabi. And that team's going to do their presentation from QuickBooks Connect. So pretty much the next 5 or 6 weeks, we're going to have every single week a presentation with deeper content on some of this stuff. Today was probably the high level one, and then it starts getting deeper and deeper the rest of the weeks. So with that said, I'm going to stop the recording, and we'll hopefully see everybody next week.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.